Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Montgomery County Council's work session. We'll begin with property tax options, rate, amount, and income tax offset credit. We have a committee recommendation from the GO committee. Let me call on Chair Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I want to thank my GO committee colleagues, council members Katz and Friedson. Today, I will be reporting out on 6 GO items. We're going to begin with item number 5, which is the property tax options, rate, amount, and the income tax offset credit. Also, appreciation to Mr. Gene Smith for once again preparing a really great packet and leading us through our session. Very quickly, I want to highlight that you will find in the packet a point that states that, of course, our review this year in terms of the council's options for property tax was simplified due to the charter amendment that was adopted last year, which Councilmember Friedson, of course, led the charge in that respect, and the voters did approve that. Obviously, the amended charter provides more opportunities for the county to benefit from our investments in economic development, and I believe that this is a very important point now more than ever. Also, I appreciate the work of the entire council in assessing this issue and looking for creative solutions for us to take advantage of our growth. We did examine 2 issues, of course, the income tax offset credit and the weighted property tax rate for FY22. The executive recommended and the committee concurred with maintaining the income tax offset credit value at $692, same as FY21. This tax credit creates some progressivity for our residents by providing more benefit to lower value homes. For the weighted property tax rate, the executive has recommended a rate that is at the charter limit. And obviously, I think it's important to acknowledge and appreciate the administration's efforts for recommending a budget that is in line with the current charter. In terms of the weighted property tax rate, it is 0.9785 per $100 of assessed value. That is what the committee has recommended. That basically, I think, is the summary of the 3-0 recommendation. Mr. Smith, anything that I missed?
I do want to note real quick that the public comments for this happened before the staff packet went out to the GO committee last week, and we did receive comments regarding the ITOC or the income tax offset credit and the homestead tax credit, and the GO committee said they'd come back to look at that in a future date. Staff did work with finance, and will note that the number of properties that are that have not applied for the homestead tax credit but are receiving the ITOC is actually higher or greater than what it was 5 years ago. So there's still significant work to be done there, but the GO committee will be returning that at a later date, but didn't want that to be missed during this discussion.
All right, Mr. President, that is the recommendation of the GO committee. If there are any questions, of course, Mr. Smith is also available to answer them.
Terrific. I don't see any questions from our colleagues, Madam Chair. So all those in favor of adopting the committee's recommendation, please raise your hand. That is unanimous among all those present. Okay, now we're on to our climate change planning. We also have a committee recommendation from the T&E committee. Let me call on let me thank my colleagues and call on Mr. Levchenko to update us.
Okay, yes, the cover page for the packet summarizes the committee recommendations, and they were basically to concur with the executive. The climate change planning non-departmental account in the approved FY21 budget has $400,000 in general fund dollars. The CE's recommended allocation for FY22 includes the $400,000 in the base. It also includes 3 new positions that would move forward with a number of initiatives that had been identified in the climate action plan. So these 3 positions, which would be basically housed in DEP, managed in DEP, but would be funded out of this non-departmental account, account for another $250,200 in FY22. So the total amount then for the NDA would be $650,200 going into FY22. I've noted some issues that the committee discussed including the NDA work plan. The executive is expecting to, or executive staff are expecting to put out a more detailed implementation plan. The Climate Action Plan was quite a sweeping document with hundreds of interdepartmental and inside-outside work group recommendations that had been reviewed. And the work plan prioritized those, identified those with the highest impact, but did not lay out, okay, now what happens? And so that's what we're expecting to come with the finalization of the work plan, or finalization of the Climate Action Plan. We expect a more detailed implementation plan from the executive branch. The new positions are noted in the committee, or the committee packet that's attached to the council packet, and what they would cover. The focus is on electric vehicle conversions, public climate change outreach, and state level energy policy coordination. And these are all areas that were discussed at length in the Climate Action Plan, and also by the T&E committee when they discussed the Climate Action Plan earlier this year. And then after budget, I wanted to note that the council will be taking up a couple of important climate change related topics, including the Building Energy Performance Standards legislation, which has come over from the executive, but has not moved through the process here yet because we're in the middle of budget, as well as a regulation adopting the 2018 International Green Construction Code. So those are both recently transmitted, and so the council will be taking those up after conclusion of the budget. And both would significantly advance the county's greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals if they're implemented in a manner that the executive has submitted, or something close to that. So I did want to note that we have some work before us already, but we expect over the next year more initiatives to be looked at, and more items to be coming to the council for either policy discussion or review, legislation, and as well, of course, budget going forward. But with that, I'll turn it back to Committee Chair Hucker if he has any further things he wants to add. We also do have staff from the executive branch. Ms. Hochberg is here, our Assistant Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Climate Change Planning, as well as DEP officials and staff are here as well.
Terrific. Thanks, Mr. Levchenko. Yes, I'm enthusiastic about the three new positions. I mean, if anything, I think our residents are looking for action on the Climate Action Plan. They understand that everything's been upended under COVID over the last year, but they're eager to get us started on these ambitious recommendations to help us meet the ambitious goals that we set. So Ms. Hochberg, Ms. Bubar, thanks for being here. I don't know if there's anything you need to add at this point, anything we left out. Mr. Edwards, thanks for all your good work.
Yeah, I would just like to take a moment to mention that even as we've been moving forward with climate planning, we have also been taking immediate action where we can. We're acting while we plan. The executive has been leading efforts to install renewable energy, to implement energy efficiency retrofits, convert our fleets to electric, invest in public transportation, and do tree planting in terms of thousands of trees planted over the last 2 years.
Yep, well said, right. And we only want to accelerate our progress, so these three new positions should do that. Any other comments from my colleagues? Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, just quickly, I was on my phone.
I was going to tell the clerk after the vote.
Sorry. I just want to be listening to the affirmative on the previous vote. Look forward to supporting this one as well. And thank you, Ms. Hochberg, for all of your efforts. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you don't mind recording Councilmember Friedson in the affirmative on the previous vote. Hearing no objection. Okay. No other comments. All those in favor of the committee's recommendation for the Climate Action Plan NDA, please raise your hand. Great. That is unanimous. Thanks, everyone. Keep up the good work.
Thank you very much.
hit the pedal on your electric vehicle. Okay, next is on to the Office of the County Executive. We have a committee recommendation from the GO committee. Let me call on Chair Novato.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to my colleagues in the GO committee. We had a robust conversation. I want to acknowledge Mr. Rich Medellino, the CAO for the administration. We also had Ms. Kasiri, she's here, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer. In our discussion, we have Mr. Fletcher, Mr. Tibbetts, Ms. Giapong, Professor Celan from OMB, as well as Corey Orlowski from OMB. So I thank you all for working collaboratively with our analyst, Mr. Camacho, to prepare the packet and share with us the recommendation. In summary, the county executive request for the Office of County Executive is $5,641,962. That is about, that translates into 32.7 full-time equivalents. There's a decrease of 1 full-time equivalent and 0.7% from FY21. The GO committee voted to approve the county executive's request 3-0 on May 6th with 2 amendments. We voted to shift $74,400 from the Office of Intergovernmental Relations to allow Business Advancement Team to administer and manage a contract for specialized federal real estate services. This was a request by the county executive. Also, we added language to make funding for the Director of Strategic Partnership position contingent on an affirmative vote by the council to pass expedited bill 22-20, which would create that position. If, as you recall, this position is meant to be the designated point of contact between the executive and the council. And as we discussed during the work session, I think, you know, and I am personally generally supportive of strengthening communication between the executive and the council. I think it's a very important element of the work that we do. Of course, my GO committee members and I were concerned about the general lack of procedure by that particular position being included in the proposed budget without having the requisite legislation in the books. But of course, we do recognize that the bill was introduced only days before we began the remote work. And therefore, I think that it's, you know, acceptable that we needed to bring this back to the council's attention. And as a compromise, and given the limited time that we have available for the budget process, we did vote to include the language, and I believe we're going to be acting on this legislation either tomorrow or sometime very soon. Sorry, I can get my days mixed up. Therefore, we decided to include that language and recognize that a delay of 2 or more weeks just to work on one issue when the rest of the budget has been decided was simply not acceptable outcome for our residents. So this is the solution that we came up with, and then we went ahead and voted, but it's contingent on passing that particular bill. Other than that, I don't believe that there were any other issues. Mr. Camacho or my colleagues, if there are any other things that you'd like to add, this would be the time. And also, of course, Mr. Medellino or Ms. Casir, is there anything else? You know, I just pass it on to you, Mr. President, and you can call him whoever needs to discuss.
Mr. Mandolino, welcome, and all of your team here, Ms. Kasiri. Any questions? Anything you want to add?
No, I want to just very much thank the GO committee. Apologize that I don't have a jacket on today, but I'm out of town and I didn't come prepared for today's meeting. I want to thank the committee for all of its various recommendations. We're glad we've been able to settle the contracting issue with the federal contractor, and we appreciate your hopeful consideration of the expedited bill tomorrow afternoon. And it's on the agenda for tomorrow, I think at 2:30.
Terrific. Any other comments, questions? Okay, yes, we have a tough dress code here, but we'll forgive you this time. All those in favor of the committee's recommendation, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Excellent. Congratulations to everybody on this call. We've now hit 60% of our residents have received their full vaccination. So we're overachieving a day early. Next is the Office of Intergovernmental Relations, Chair Novato.
All right. So Mr. Camacho also has prepared the packet for us, and of course, he's available for any questions. First, I want to thank our Office of Intergovernmental Relations for all their extraordinary work, especially given tough circumstances that we faced with the pandemic and a lot of the activity that happened during the legislative session in Annapolis. And as always, this is an office that is ably led by Ms. Wenger, and we've worked to enhance some of the processes in terms of how the council works with this office to streamline and to make sure their lines of communication are always open, especially during the frenzy of the session. So for that, we just want to express our appreciation again to Ms. Wenger. Basically, the GO committee voted to approve the county executive requested budget and amendments to shift $74,400 to the county executive budget for the administration of federal real estate services contract by the business advancement team. And we just discussed this in the previous item. And the total for requests to fund this office is $1,165,687. That's 5.3 FTEs. As I stated earlier, there was just that one shift that we believe to be important, as of course is tied to a lot of the post-COVID-19 work that we're doing, tied to economic development and issues of federal leases and things of that nature. It's important for us to have a point person that is actually working very much aligned with our business team. That really is a very straightforward budget request. Mr. Camacho, if there's anything that I left out.
No, I think you covered it. It was just that one shift in funding for the professional services federal real estate contract.
Great. All right. So with that, Mr. President, you have a recommendation.
Terrific. Ms. Wenger, thanks to you and your outstanding team for all their hard work. This would have been a really difficult legislative year under any circumstances with all the historic bills, Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights reform and Bill to Learn and many other things. And you had to do it with COVID as well. So thanks as usual for all your hard work. We all appreciate it. Mr. Camacho, anyone else, any colleagues that want to chime in? Okay. With that, please, all those in favor of adopting the committee's recommendation, please raise your hand. That is unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the help that you lend to us during the session and even during the interim. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Stay in touch. Keep up.
We will.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thanks, Mel. Now on to the County Council Office General FY22 operating budget. Chair Novato.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is I think, very important budget for this body. I think that I am not alone in recognizing that 2020 really came to show all of us the importance of making sure that we have a council office, central staff, our analysts, our own council member staff, etc., that we have the capacity necessary to not only do our day-to-day work, but to make sure that we stand ready in the event of a crisis. And boy, what a crisis it has been. And how extraordinary has it been to be able to count on the talent, the dedication, the absolute selfless care and professionalism of all our staff. If we council members have felt the stress, because has not just been about making sure that our own families are protected, but we, at least I felt very personally and still feel the responsibility of protecting our residents. Imagine how it has been for our staff that has had to be there to support us while they themselves, some were affected personally by COVID, and others have family members as well. And each and every one of them has stepped up time and time again. And I think it is very important that this body recognize that we cannot shortchange our capacity and provide the necessary resources to serve a jurisdiction like ours. A county of more than 1.1 million residents, a county that is so extraordinarily diverse, a county that is known for its excellence. Excellence doesn't come by shortchanging this important work. And so I want to just first lead by saying thank you on behalf of the GO committee members, and I'm sure on behalf of our colleagues, for everything that our staff has done, especially during this pandemic. I think that, you know, no matter what anybody says, this has been a very critical and life-changing experience. The GO committee voted on May 6th to recommend $12,786,526. That's a 1.38% increase for the council office. In addition, in there, it's included an addition of $40,000 for each council member office, which increases this to $360,000 for each council office. And also an addition of $100,000 for contractual services related to ongoing equity and inclusion training. And that, again, I think it's reflective of just some of the things that we need to focus on and some of the resources that we need. I'm going to let Ms. Michelson just share with you a couple of data points that she shared with the committee in terms of how they've tracked the increase in correspondence and some of the work from the council. And I'll close by saying this, because I know oftentimes I am asked about the workload of council members. I would be, you know, I'm always reflecting on how things used to be, perhaps even for my predecessor, Councilmember Praser, may she rest in peace, and thinking of how things were back in the day, where you might have written a letter to a council member requesting or asking for about a particular issue. And the letter would take maybe 2-3 days. And then you would research the answer, and then you would respond perhaps via that letter, and it would take another 2 or 3 days. So by then, maybe you had like a week or two in terms of responding to that particular issue. Of course, at some point, you know, we got faxes and then we got emails and things like that. Today, it is instant in real time. And it is at all hours of the day. And this is the nature of communication. And in many ways, we're able to do so much more, but at the same time, it requires an extraordinary amount of dedication and attention and staff work. Work-life balance is not even a thing sometimes in this particular work, but we do it because we believe in service. Therefore, I think this is why, again, we have to be mindful of the importance of providing the resources to this office. Ms. Michelson.
Yes, thank you. And to follow on the chair's comments, I do want to note that we have a catch-22 situation in that I think we've been far more effective through social media in reaching out to our residents and letting them know what the council's doing. And the downside of that is you receive a lot more correspondence and requests from your constituents. I think everyone sensed that the workload was increasing dramatically, and we finally had a chance to look at some of the data points to see whether what we were perceiving was actually happening, and we're shocked to find that in a 9-year period, there was a 6-fold increase in the amount of correspondence coming into council member offices. And that has nothing, you know, that does not include all of the phone calls, which we believe are increasing at an equally significant amount. And so the workload on council member office staff has just been growing exponentially. This is a very small increase that we've recommended because of the fiscal constraints. I do not by any means say that this is sufficient for the large increase in workload that I think the offices are experiencing, but we tried to find a midpoint of saying that some additional support was necessary without putting too much pressure on the budget. So the $40,000 per office is not even the equivalent of a full-time staff person, but we think will definitely help. And we will need to continue to reassess this and to see whether that is sufficient. And before I turn it back to the chair, I just want to take a moment to thank Sandra Marin of our staff, who plays a critical role in putting together our budget and does a superb job. We don't have the chance often to publicly recognize her, and I wanted to take that opportunity to do so now. So thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Sandra, for everything as well. Council President.
Ms. Michelson, I just want to thank you for all your hard work. I just want to underscore what you said. Our constituent service requests alone, depends on if you're looking at one office or all 9 offices and how many people are copied on it. And there's a lot of ways to slice and dice the data, but I've seen the most striking one is that our constituent emails alone are up 682% over 2011. And of course, that doesn't include Facebook, Twitter, texts, all the other requests we're receiving. I think this is not only money well spent, I think it's really inadequate to keep up with the growth in constituent requests. And it doesn't keep up also in the need I've been outspoken about for years, which is we're in the oversight business. And if we, by adding staff, can't find duplication, savings, other ways to save the budget, inefficiency in a $6 billion budget, well, then shame on us. I think there's a great need for us to have additional staff for both oversight and constituent service. I think this is a very, very reasonable increase, and I really do think we need more in the future. You see where my colleagues are. Colleagues, any comments? Councilmember Jawando.
I just want to say amen to both what you and Councilmember Navarro did, and I appreciate the GO committee. This has been something that I think, there's a lot of mistruths out there, but I think our residents know how hard each of our offices have worked and how hard our central staff has worked to respond to them and get them the help that they've needed. Whether it's unemployment insurance, navigating that system, finding testing, go down the list. But also, to your point, at the same time, we've had critical oversight issues that have distracted us. Go down the list, every agency, and I think when you invest in government, in quality, responsive government, that helps all of our residents, and it's a good thing. So this is a very modest investment, but I'm glad we're taking it, and appreciate the work of the Council President, my colleagues, and Ms. Michelson and her staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Vice President Albornoz.
Thank you. Certainly ditto everything that's been said. I think this has not been a 5-day-a-week job. It really never was. But particularly over this last year and a half, the way that all of our staffs in the central office have stepped up is truly remarkable. And a lot of it goes behind the scenes, but the coordination of the budget packets, the coordination of the federal funding, the links to our executive branch agencies, there's a true partnership and synergy whose story will never be fully told. And to have these additional resources, to be able to, all of our offices have assisted with translation services at various points. And as Councilmember Jawando just talked about, and Chair Navarro as well, the navigation that's gone on for some of these really complex constituent issues has literally helped save lives. And that's not hyperbole. It really isn't. People have been in truly dire circumstances. And I'll also want to note too, the synergy between at-large and district council members has been seamless. It's there, and we work collaboratively together every day to address all of these challenges. We support each other in a variety of different ways. So thank you to the committee. Thank you, Ms. Michelson, as well, and your team. And so this is an important step forward, and more steps will need to be taken because although we've gone to the next phase of addressing this pandemic, there will be, we're just, the ramifications of everything we've experienced is just now starting to become clear. And so we're going to have to remain diligent. So thank you all for this hard work, and especially our teams.
Absolutely. And I think it is worth saying too, our residents, I think, believe understandably that we oversee the state, the county government, we have an oversight responsibility over WSSC, over obviously park and planning. We have to work with state agencies. We have to work with federal agencies. I came back from a run early Saturday morning to meet a constituent on my back porch who was he's a small business owner sticking up for a friend who's disabled and facing eviction from his home based on a tax lien, and he could pay his tax lien if the state government would have paid him his unemployment insurance over the last 2 years. So that's the kind of complicated multi-agency and multi-jurisdictional cases that we deal with all the time. And I think this is a modest increase. I think we're going to need more in the future unless we see a great reduction in the requests that we get. But all those in favor of the recommendation from the hard-working members of the GO committee, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you. Next is the Office of the Inspector General. Chair Navarro.
I do believe there's
it's item 10.
It's not on the list here. Sorry. I skipped one. Sorry. Next is the NDA Legislative Branch Communication Outreach.
Yes, thank you. And so for this item, we welcome Ms. Sonia Healy. And as I said during our budget, our committee session, this really dovetails very nicely to this conversation that we just had. The communications office really has been the nexus, especially during this pandemic. We all understood very early on that information was key to saving lives. But if we did not, pay close attention in real time, as we were just discussing, because this is what it takes in real time. If we were not able to step up and really provide the information necessary, the guidance, that this definitely was, in many instances, life or death. And our communications outreach office has done just incredible work in a very creative fashion, in a very quick fashion, to respond to this emergency, to respond to this crisis, and to make sure that it's done appropriately and in multiple languages. And I wanted to set, just for the record, because I think there is a theme here where we're talking about the capacity of the council to respond and to provide our oversight, and just remind this council of the work that has taken place in order to get us to this point. The Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee has been working diligently to strengthen this office in recognition of the role that it plays in us being able to then provide the transparency to our residents, all our residents. And I'm talking, way back before we were, talking about equity and cultural proficiency. We're talking about starting in 2011 when this committee led the way when I proposed that we begin with a Spanish language outreach and communications person. It was just a part-time contractor. Then the NDA was created in 2012, and since then, this has become a permanent position. Since then, we have had everything from weekly Spanish language radio shows, for example. We have had a civic curriculum that has been now expanded to the rest of the county. We also have expansion of outreach support to include part-time Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese language outreach to our communities. We have also strengthened video editor position with, videographer, a second multilingual specialist to expand our outreach to the Korean, Chinese, and Vietnamese communities. We have a contract with Línea Directa, which is a show that is shown on Telemundo. The Radio America show was expanded to an hour, and that has become a real important source of information, especially during this particular pandemic. We also funded support for translation and interpretation services. You notice the subtitles on the screen, so that way people who are, English speakers can understand what is being said in people's own languages. That is all about transparency and providing access to our residents. In calendar year 2019, we had a civic engagement coordinator for the council established. And in addition to all of this NDA has funded customer relationship management system to strengthen our electronic communications. Of course, televising all of our sessions, including, of course, our state legislation. That has been a really important component for transparency. A new legislative branch webmaster position, new IT support to help our senior IT specialists meet the expanded IT needs of our legislative branch offices, etc. And so what we have done is we've taken an office that was, in my opinion, not able to meet the demands, and we have every year worked to enhance that capacity and to strengthen that capacity. And I believe that if we had not done that, it would have just been, I can't even think of what it would have been like during this pandemic. And so that is why the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee recommended adoption of the budget of $1,180,342. And then we also added the following: multicultural communications and community outreach manager. It is important to recognize that outreach engagement is critical for the work that we do. We were just talking about the constituent services that we provide, and we have seen, in my opinion, what can be done, right? At almost every single public hearing, we have people that come and testify in their language. I think that we need somebody to begin to do that work of real, authentic outreach and engagement so that everyone in our county knows what is happening and is empowered to advocate on their own behalf. Instead of us perpetuating this notion that people need to have mediators or gatekeepers, that is not the way real democracy should work. So we believe it's very important to have this as the next sort of step in strengthening this office. Contractual assistance for bilingual audio-visual information services, $50,000. That is also very important because as we're trying to communicate in the most effective way, many times it takes, we have to do infographic, we have to do these types of things. It needs to be culturally proficient. It cannot be just a Google Translate type of situation, right? So that is specialized work. We need to do that. Full-time Spanish translator and interpreter, that is so that we're not always running around trying to contract people, or we keep tasking our staff, our incredible bilingual staff, to do that work. They always step up. They always do that, but that is not their job. And it underestimates the skill set necessary, the professional skill sets necessary to do this work. It's not right that we keep putting that as an additional, task on our staff. And the software solutions and equipment for broadcasting in multiple languages, $30,000. So this is, in my opinion, a modest package to strengthen the capacity of this office. In turn, that will then serve to ensure that our constituents are served adequately the way it's supposed to be. It is very much in line with our racial equity and social justice goals, and it allows us to best represent our constituents. When you think about Gaithersburg being the second most diverse city in the country, we're just so fortunate here in Montgomery County. I believe that this body needs to have the capacity to serve all of our constituents, especially those who may not be English dominant. So that is what the committee recommended. I will now let Ms. Sonia Healy make a few remarks or anything she wants to add. And if I left anything out, also please let me know, Ms. Michelson, but I think that covers the work of the committee.
I just wanted to take a quick moment to express my appreciation to you, Chair Navarro, for being the architect of a holistic communications plan way early in this process. So I want to thank you so much for that, because it really has allowed us to push out critical information to our residents across the county this year. I also want to thank each of the council members. You have stepped up, your staff has stepped up to offer support to our office throughout this year. and really want to just give my appreciation to you all, as well as to recognize the communications team, who has done a fabulous job of pulling together to help outside agencies, departments, and our residents throughout this period. So just my deep gratitude to all, and we will continue stepping up and doing the work under your leadership. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And you just reminded me of a very important point. It just feels like there's just been so much going on. But at the beginning of the pandemic, when, again, we understood that we needed to stand up appropriate multicultural, multilingual communications, this council, the offices immediately identified the language capacity that they had in their own offices, and a team was put together. Again, these are people who are hired to do something else, but they decided to step up and immediately began to work on doing things like translating sometimes the governor's press releases or the orders. It was seamless and it was professional. It was high quality. And I really want to thank each council member and the staff that stepped up at that time. It was really, truly a mobilization without asking any questions, sometimes working until midnight to get these things done. Everybody did it because they understood that it was absolutely necessary. Nobody asked, well, how come we don't have a translation interpretation unit? Or how about this? No, people just said, let's go, send it to me. Here it is. Let's send it out. And that is the true spirit of service. So thank you to all for doing all of this during a very stressful time. Mr. President, that's the recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Navarro, and thank you very much, Ms. Healy, for you and your team. And I just really want to just start off by saying thank you. Since the beginning of the pandemic, your office and the individuals have been tremendous in helping us to get out the word. Much of what we were trying to offer individuals in terms of support came through the communications office, and in partnership with you and your staff and the individuals in our office, we're able to communicate life-saving information to individuals. That's incredibly important. And I don't want to, gloss over this. I mean, because the messages that we put out, whether it was about testing, then when it came to vaccinations, saved people's lives. It really did. Having that information out there for folks, where to go, what to do, what information to trust when there was so much misinformation that was purposely being put out. We were a clearinghouse for a lot of the initial information, and that continued through and continued through to this very day, in which we continue to communicate about what's needed when it comes to vaccinations. But on top of that, your office also supported the myriad of initiatives that each of us care about deeply. And I just want to thank you for your great partnership in helping us with Council Member for a Day, continuing to empower and lift the voices of our young people and make sure that they were supported in this brand new effort that was out there. But the list goes on, and each of us as council members have done so many great things that you heard Council Member Navarro talk about, and you helped to support those efforts. And that's incredibly important. So I continue to support the department. I think that you do a phenomenal job as leader. I can't thank enough all of your staff who continue to help and support us in each and every way they deem possible, telling stories about the great work that's being done, understanding that unfortunately some of those stories don't make it to the cutting room floor of our mainstream media, because there's just so much more attention to national news in this area that we oftentimes get lost. But those stories are important. Those stories need to be heard, and people need to see about the great work that's happening in this county by their elected leaders. And so I just really want to applaud you for continuing to do that great work. And then last but certainly not least, I just really want to thank Councilmember Navarro for continuing to push this. We've talked about it with the census. Who we are as a community has significantly changed over the decades. And so it's incredibly important for us to make sure that as we put out that information, that we do so in a way that makes it convenient for folks who are still learning the English language and who are still trying to do their best. But I imagine if I went to South America now, or went to Spain right now, or went to Mexico right now and decided I wanted to be immersed, even after all of the experience I have, it would still be tough for me to understand every single thing that's being said or that I tried to read. And so we have to put ourselves in those same shoes for those individuals that are here, that are trying to do their best to understand and follow everything that goes on here, but just need a little help. And so that's why these translations matter. It's not for the sake of folks not wanting to make sure that they understand the information. For those who may, think, oh, well, why are we doing this? And why is this important? They just need to learn English. Well, imagine if you got thrown into another country and how you had to try and learn the language quickly. Those are the things that folks face. And this is important information that sometimes is a matter of life and death. And while it may not always be that serious, just learning about your children and what's going on in the schools and, what's happening with school lunches and all that information, all that kind of stuff, we just can't minimize how important it is. And so that's why communication matters, why it's incredibly important, the mission that you have. And that's why I'll wholeheartedly be supporting these great initiatives that were carved out by you, Madam Chair, and the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. So thank you guys very much, all of you, for all of your great work.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. I just wanted to compliment the committee's recommendation and express appreciation for the chair, Councilmember Navarro, and say that, you succeed through crisis when you're prepared for it. And in a lot of different ways, the work that has gone on in this area over the past number of years has better prepared us for this difficult moment. And the investment in outreach to many communities where English is not the first language, to try to invent that, well, first of all, it must be ingrained in everything that we do, just as a starting point. But I think it also goes without saying that to try to stand that up when you actually, need it in a crisis versus having built all those systems and have things in place in advance it's the difference between making progress and succeeding with it and not. And it has been a steady effort for many years to expand upon these programs, and it's well worth it. Same goes for the fact that we're filming all the committee meetings. That capacity if we hadn't built that capacity, how would we have conducted our virtual council work? All of these things are related. So it's really important topic area. And it's one where we just need to continue to make investments and build this infrastructure because it makes the council more resilient and more effective, and it just helps with everything. So pleased to support the recommendation.
Thanks, Councilmember. Sonia, I'll just chime in. Thanks so much personally to you and your staff. You've been an enormous resource and source of support to me and all my staff all this the last 6 months. I'm used to having to knowing I can reach you at midnight on Saturdays and on Sundays. Not everybody in your role appreciates that that's in the job description, but I know you do, and I really appreciate your vision for the office and your ability to collaborate with all of us. To Council, Chair Navarro's point, I see evidence every week in my district and outside my district that the requests and the expressions of need from our diverse community, they just continue to get more complicated and more complex. And it's great that our ability to communicate with everyone has stepped up and it's become more sophisticated each year. Honestly, it doesn't really mean our community has changed. It does, I know, on the margins, and the census will show that. But the need has been there for many years. It means that the community now knows that we're here, and that the county council, not just the county government, is here, and that we are a trusted source of important information and access to services for them. And that is really important, and few things are more important than that. So anyway, kudos to Chair Navarro for starting us down this road, to the GO committee for continuing this work for many years now, and colleagues for supporting it. Few things, we all took, pledged an equity commitment 2 years ago, and few things are more central to our equity commitment that we made to ourselves and our residents as to end any disparities in communication. Because if people don't communicate with us, they don't know what we can do to solve problems for them and to represent them. It all starts with communication, and that's what this budget's all about. So I'll tell you, I support the committee recommendation. I hope everybody will. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very well said. I agree with all my colleagues, and just wanted to be on record to Ms. Healy and your team. Just thank you for all that you're doing, and thanking the committee, and particularly Chair Navarro, for pushing this as hard as she has, both through her presidency, but also now as chair of GO. This is so important. You know, I think many of us, myself included, ran for office because we wanted to give people who haven't had a voice, and try to be a channel for that. And, you know, you can't do that effectively if you don't have the tools and the systems in place, and certainly the communication infrastructure in place to do it. And this is a big part of this. And this budget is going to help us take an astronomical step forward. There's so much more to do. We need better systems in place. We're going to need more resources. We talked about this for the Council in general. This is another example, I think, going forward, because we've been majority people of color for a long time. We've had a lot of languages spoken for a long time. And I expect the need to continue to rise. As we do better, no good deed goes unpunished, right? As we do better, the need will, and that's a good thing. And you know, Shirley Chisholm, you know, often said, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And Sonia, your team unfolds the chair, right? You know, it's one thing to have the chair, but you're unfolding it so people understand what's going on. They can actually sit down. And so it's such a critical component. And I just want to appreciate all the work that's been done, and really look forward to taking this next step in how we serve all of our residents. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor of adopting the committee's recommendations, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Okay, next is on to the Office of the Inspector General. Chair Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President, and welcome to Ms. Lamarzi and Mr. Howard, who prepared a packet, and Ms. Crystal, Sally, for also being here today from the Office of Management and Budget. So first, let me say that I want to acknowledge the leadership of Councilmember Friedson in the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee for really focusing squarely on the need for us to continue to strengthen the Office of the Inspector General. Like so many things that we are talking about today, who would have thought, right, that we would be right now in a particular situation where having a strengthened Office of Inspector General with capacity to do audits, you know, how important that is, especially now with all of the federal funding coming, with a lot of the issues going on. You know, there's just so much. And, you know, we're so fortunate to not only have Ms. Lamarzi in this particular position, but to also have been able to strengthen that office and be rest assured that our taxpayers can, you know, feel certain that there are these extra set of eyes ensuring that everything is working the way it's supposed to work. And so with that, I want to thank Ms. Lamarzi and her team for already hitting the ground running to provide that kind of oversight. So for this particular item, the committee approved the FY22 Office of Inspector General budget as recommended by the accounting executive, which is the recommendation of $2,091,455. Also, we added $61,362 to Category 3 list to allow a new auditor position to start in July instead of January. We also approved the following language for inclusion in the FY22 budget resolution. Basically, we said as required by County Code, Section 2-151F, the Council recommends projected budgets for the Office of Inspector General of $2,190,455 for FY23, $2,190,455 in FY24, and $2,190,455 in FY2025. The projected budget recommendations reflect a minimum baseline for the Office of Inspector General, and the Council expects these budgets will increase to reflect a multi-year staffing plan to implement Bill 11-19 as part of the Inspector General's 4-year work program. The Council's approved FY 2022 budget for the Office of the Inspector General $2,091,455 is an increase of $252,843 over the previous FY 2022 projected budget of $1,835,612 due to the addition of 2 FTEs. And this was language that we agreed upon, recognizing that that bill that we passed in 2019 calls for increased capacity for this office, and we wanted to make sure that that was captured in the budget resolution to signal that this is a council that is committed in continuing to strengthen this office and being true to the legislative intent. I think that sums up the recommendation. Ms. Lamarcy, if you have any comments, and then Mr. Howard, also if you have any comments afterwards, if anything that I may have missed. Ms. Lamarcy.
Thank you. Nothing to add, just my continued gratitude to this council for your support of the office and continued eye on oversight and increasing our capacity. We are fully staffed right now, and I look forward to bringing in more staff members so we can continue to meet the mandate of 1119 and continue to provide you and the executive branch with actionable information to improve our county and support the needs of all of our residents.
I have nothing to add. You've covered it all, Chair Navarro. Thank you.
Mr. President, over to you.
Thank you all so much. Great to see you, Ms. Navarro. Ms. Navarro, keep up the good work. All those in favor of adopting the committee's recommendations, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. There it is. Okay, now it's unanimous. Okay, now on to the Office of Inspector General. Chair Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think for this item, we probably, it's in my list here that I think we would have Mr. Friedman, Director of the Office of Consumer Protection, Mr. Crow from the Department of Finance, Mr. Ball from the Office of Consumer Protection, and I believe Ms. Estela Bernate Gomez of OMB. Welcome, everyone. So this is what the committee did. So the committee approved $3 million of appropriation to the FY22 budget for the Public Elections Fund, including $2,850,000 for public matching funds and $150,000 for contractual staff support to administer the fund. We also supported the addition of 1.5 FTEs and $179,305 to the FY22 budget for the Office of Consumer Protection to establish a new public liaison position and provide administrative support. And of course, this item will also be further discussed during the Office of Consumer Protection work session. Basically, as we all know, we had a very robust conversation during the last amendment of the Public Campaign Finance Program, the bill that amended the program, and in there it identified that the executive needed to designate a liaison, and this is because Mr. Crow, who did an amazing job, superhuman job during the first inaugural public campaign finance run the last election, obviously that is just not sustainable. And it was clearly established that we needed to have a liaison and also some administrative support in order to respond to the many questions, navigate through this particular program. And we can anticipate, I'm sure, that 2022 will bring quite a bit of interest and energy in participating in this program. So it's important to be proactive and be ready for for the election cycle. The executive, so the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee had an initial work session, and we decided to postpone the vote until we were able to get clarity from the administration in terms of where would this public liaison position be, what exactly was the plan. They came back and they proposed that it would be in the Office of Consumer Protection. Mr. Friedman came and also spoke to us that there would be a transition where Mr. Samuel Bull will be the one to basically transition in starting right away because people are beginning to qualify. And that there will also be additional contracting dollars for the administrative work that is needed. we were concerned about the capacity of the Office of Consumer Protection, and that is why we decided to add some capacity to that office. And the reason why this office was identified, it was shared with us that there was a, basically there needed to be consideration to the notion that the county executive will probably participate in public campaign finance. And so they felt that this would be an office that would be independent in managing all of this. And the committee felt that that made sense. And so basically this is where we landed, and that is the recommendation. And I hope that those folks who are watching very carefully because they are participating in the program or want to participate know that yes, the capacity will be there to provide that kind of support, basically the technical assistance necessary to navigate the program. And that yes, we are also making sure that we have the $3 million there, which will bring, I believe, the fund right now to $4,950,000. I believe that's the total. So that is the recommendation from the GO committee. And if I believe Mr. Mia should be also, he's the one that prepared the packet. If there are any questions, he'll be able to answer those. That is the recommendation, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I don't see any requests to speak. So thank you all for your recommendation. Thanks to all the staff. All those in favor of the recommendation from the committee, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you so much, Mr. Friedman. Keep up the good work.
Will do.
Okay, now we are on to the Public Election Fund. Madam Chair.
I believe we just did that.
Sorry, I don't know whether they're separated in my notes. Now we're on to the
Office of Consumer Protection.
Office of Consumer Protection. Notes are outdated. Thank you.
I believe that's Councilmember Katz. That's what I have in my notes.
Thank you.
If not, okay.
Thank you, Mr. President and Madam Chair. It actually was both of us.
It's both of us. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
What happened was, as you recall, I'm on government operations as well, but hopefully you recall that as well. But what happened was that we on the Public Safety Committee had approved the consumer affairs, consumer protection, but then we came back because of the election fund. We needed to change it slightly. And of course, we like to tease Mr. Friedman, and we said that we knew that he didn't have enough to do. And that's why we had to do that for him. And I have to tell you, all of our departments, and I mean this sincerely, all of them many times do so much more than the assistance that they receive. But none have that same situation as consumer protection. They always seem to have to do more and more with less and less on a continual basis. But they always step up. And they always do a great job. And that's what this, once again, as was mentioned in the previous discussion, that's what once again happened. We realized that there needed to be a different department looking at a public finance election fund. And that's where we decided that, and with the help of the county executive, we decided that this should be under consumer protection. So that's how we got from A to B, and was discussed earlier, that's how they got the additional assistance.
Yeah, so I don't know if we need to vote on the budget for the Office of Consumer Protection as, I guess, amended.
I think we probably should, yeah.
Yeah.
All those in favor of the committee recommendation on the Office of Consumer Protection, please raise your hand. Terrific, that is unanimous. And now the next two items, I'm going to call on Chairman Reamer, the NDA for the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation and the NDA for incubator programs. Chairman Reamer.
Thank you. Well, these items, we've had a little bit of a tumult here over funding sources. So I'm sure my colleagues have been following the memos that are in your inbox and so forth. But I'll turn it to council staff in a moment to kind of take us into those issues. The core question, or the core issue before us, the committee, we talked about the work of the Economic Development Corporation. One of the issues we focused on is their new and growing program around what they call the federal engagement strategy, which is leveraging the powerful research institutions that we have here, NIH, FDA, NIST, the Harvard, Stanford, and MIT of Montgomery County, leveraging those to create more entrepreneurship, more economic development, more companies, more jobs, more dynamism. And MCEDC has a terrific program that they are building out as an initiative of the committee, and making a lot of progress on. And they've brought in some really global leaders in this arena, Phil Singerman and Brad Stewart among them. So that work is evolving. I see we are now joined on screen by our MCEDC partners. The executive had sent us a budget that included a number of new programs. And that's where it gets a little complicated, because the funding source for the new programs was recommended as ARPA funding. And the committee, on a 2-to-1 vote, Councilmember Jawando dissenting, what's the word? Not precociously, but with prescience, dissented from that funding source. And then subsequently, we've learned with the new ARPA guidance that has come down that it's not an acceptable funding source for these programs. So now the council will need to discuss, what action we want to take, and there isn't really a committee recommendation at this point. I'll certainly share my view, that I think we ought to come back to this over the summer. But those enhanced program ideas are in your packet, and I'll ask Jean to walk through those. And we're joined today by Ben Wu and Bill Tompkins, and I see we're also joined by Jerome Fletcher with the executive branch, and Pofin and Josh from OMB. So Jean, I'm going to send it to you, and then we'll work our way through.
Thank you, Mr. Reamer. I'll touch on the memo that the executive sent over this morning with the addendum that council staff put out for today, related both to the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation NDA and incubator programs NDA, as they're both kind of in the same place, although we can go through the committee's recommendations for both items separately after we address kind of the new news. The new news, as you just shared, is the ARPA funding that was recommended for the enhancements in both the incubators NDA and the MCEDC NDA is no longer eligible based on the county attorney's office review of the Treasury guidance we received last week. What the executive has recommended doing, since the ARPA funding was used in the fiscal 22 budget, the budget was balanced, used ARPA funding. He's recommended using additional revenue loss in 21 to provide a $1.3 million in addition to reserves, and then using that reserve funding to therefore fund these new enhancements in fiscal 22. And so as staff notes, the end result of all the accounting is that the amount of reserves that the county will put forward in fiscal 22 is 1.3 million less. But nonetheless, the county's executive recommendation is to use reserves from 21 to fund these new enhancements in 22. And as staff notes, that both of these items does not appear to meet the council's policy goals for reserves, both because of the nature of the enhancements, which are both new and ongoing, and using reserves to fund those does not seem to fit with that policy goal. as well as the county's council has not achieved its policy goal of 10%. I realize we're coming out of the pandemic, but obviously using reserves now would continue to erode the ability to achieve the 10% policy goal in the near future. And so for both of these items, and I'll defer to the council if they want to take them separately or together, council staff has given options. I have not made a recommendation since it's kind of new news. The option is that obviously one option is anything can go to category 2 as the council considers these things, some or all of them. The other option is discussed during the MCDC NDA during April 22nd budget. The EDC continues to report a fund reserve of more than $2 million. And certainly so for the EDC, not the incubators NDA, they can continue to potentially fund some of these or begin funding some of these in fiscal 22. Should the council and the executive want to continue to pursue these. As you noted, Mr. Rimmer, we can come back to that and review it later, but that does not mean that those programs necessarily would have to stop. Obviously, for the incubators NDA, as noted in the staff report today, the committee already recommended coming back and reviewing those enhancements based on the updated study that the executive did over the last year. And so those seem to be on pause based on the committee's recommendation earlier as well. So I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Mr. Reamer, if you have any additional information. I'm sorry, if you have any questions.
Great. I see Josh has raised his hand, but I wanted to invite Ben Wu or to share any comments if you so chooses.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without wading into the source of the funding, I think that the county executive offered up in his budget recommendation a plus up to the MCDC's budget because he understood the importance of economic recovery to the future of this county. And when we had our Fed committee hearing with you, Mr. Chairman, I think that substantively was reinforced as well. So, the programs in this budget enhancement is designed to help us get to the other side of this pandemic. So I would urge the members of the council to support the programs in the budget enhancement. As far as the funding source, those are issues that we recognize need to be deliberated and considered by both the county executive and the county council.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Josh, did you have a comment?
Thank you. Joshua Waters, Office of Management and Budget. I just wanted to clarify just a couple of things that from a macro perspective, the executive's revised proposal for the use of ARPA funds leaves us in the same place now as it would at CE recommended. The same amount of funds are used in both scenarios and the same amount of funds are left unallocated in both scenarios. What the proposal does, it allows us to recognize the ARPA funds in a way that would continue to support these expenditures, these enhancements in FY22 at a macro level, which would be consistent. As Mr. Smith points out, you would have to reduce general fund, or you would have to reduce the reserve appropriation with from in FY22 by 1.3 million. However, that would be offset by the additional of 1.3 million in FY21. So you would still remain at the 9.6% fund reserve level that the executive recommended on March 15th.
Gene, can you comment on that, please?
I believe we're saying the same thing regarding the macro of the budget and the use of these funds. Regarding the executive has used additional ARPA funding in 21 based on the revenue loss, and will fund these expenditures by reducing the reserve contribution in fiscal 22. The result is rather than balancing the budget by finding offsetting reductions, as the council does through category 3, he has simply programmed additional reserves and is using those reserves in 21 from 21 to 22.
So in other words, we have a category 3. We're adding items to category 3 in a very limited way, and we're seeking to offset those enhancements so that the overall impact is neutral. And the executive's proposal is to just go ahead and not do that and just fund these enhancements with the future general with the reserve. So in light of the fact that MCEDC does have its own reserve, and that these are enhancements, this is not the existing operation of the organization. These are new ideas that MCEDC has put on the table, I think it makes sense to just keep working on this and come back. And while I think these are important, it doesn't seem to me, I wish the executive had given us a better recommendation as a foundation and put them into the budget more fully, rather than funding them through the ARPA strategy, which is then kind of being pulled out from underneath us. So anyway, back to you, Mr. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to Chairman Reamer. If I understood, I know it wasn't an official motion, or I don't know if it was, but the thought of deferring on this, obviously I appreciate the chair's use of presciently in regards to my action in committee. I was not comfortable with using ARPA funding, but I also wasn't comfortable with the $2 million fund balance. And am I right on that number, Mr. Smith?
That's correct. Their audited financials show $2.3 million on Circle 19.
Yeah, and that this would be a 20% increase in the budget with the fund balance that's been consistently significant since I've gotten on the council. And I thought it'd be better to allow the merits of these programs, I think, are really good, but to allow EDC to use their reserve and to kind of have some proof points here with the money that they have, and then come back next year with a more robust proposal. So I'm not sure if that's what, I don't think that's exactly what the chair was saying, but for whatever it's worth, I think we should not move forward with these at this time, with the guidance to the EDC that would love for you to move those forward with your current budget, and then come back next year. And if they are truly bearing fruit and need to be annualized programs, that we should consider it as part of the budget process next year. So that would be my recommendation to colleagues, and appreciate all the work that's been gone into this on both sides of the street. Thank you.
So, Mr. Council President, I just want to clarify what I'm recommending. I would recommend that we have the new enhancements come before the committee this summer, that it is possible for MCEDC to fund some or all of that through their fund balance, through their own reserve. But I don't know that we want to necessarily make that decision, that requirement, that they do that with certainty right now. I think we need to have a little bit more conversation about existing programs and how everything fits together. So the motion would, the recommendation to my colleagues is that we will come back this summer to the new programs that the executive had recommended. And, we ought to be able to tackle that pretty soon. And then if there is funding in MCEDC's existing budget, then they can proceed with them based on that.
Second, if required. I think that sounds right.
So we'll defer on this decision. I'm not sure we even need a motion, but we'll defer on this decision until the summer.
Let's ask staff for clarity. I mean, we do have to approve the MCEDC budget.
Well, that's true.
There's a question of the resolution language.
Sure. As I noted, I did both the incubators NDA and the MCDC NDA together because of the ARPA funding issue, but bifurcating those now, I will quickly note, defer to Mr. Reamer if he wants to expand on this, that the committee did recommend some budget provision language. Some of that was related to the new enhancements, but if the council does not support that addition in fiscal 22, Mr. Reamer and as the chair, but also the committee as a whole, recommended putting in a specific amount for the federal engagement strategy, and that is unrelated to the items for ARPA funding. That's part of the base budget that's for MCDC. And so the committee, I would assume, would continue to move that part of the provision forward. But since the ARPA funding situation that was just sent over by the executive did not have a committee recommendation, council staff notes that a move in a second probably is warranted here regarding the MCDC budget, but did not want to forget the provision language that the committee already had put out.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councilmember Reamer moves. Maybe we should can you restate your motion, Hans, for everybody's benefit?
Yeah, and I'll ask for council staff's assistance there, but we will approve the budget without the executive's additionally recommended programs or source of funding. And then we will come back, and while noting that we will come back to those as soon as we can. And we believe that there is funding in the base budget to do some or all of those programs.
Okay.
Yeah, and second.
Yeah, Councilmember Reamer moves, Councilmember Jawando seconds. Mr. Smith, is that all accurate from your point of view?
It's accurate for me.
Great. All those in favor of that motion, please raise your hand.
Wait, Mr.
Oh, sorry. Are you on the motion, Councilmember Friedson? I thought you were on the motion.
I'm on the overall issue, but on the motion too, because it relates. Thank you, sir. Well, a couple questions. I totally appreciate where everybody is coming from on this. I share the concerns about the use of ARPA funds. I have been talking about this in the entirety of the budget. I appreciate the packet. And Mr. Smith and I have had too many conversations about these issues to count. I just want to note a couple things. One, is there any reason, like we've done in other cases, why we wouldn't add this to Category 2, understanding that there may or may not be funds available, but just to formally have us come back to this issue? I think that would be appropriate and in keeping with what we've done in all other related issues like this. So I would suggest, unless there's a compelling reason not to find out, whether or not that could be included in the motion, since I think it'd be more consistent with what we've done elsewhere.
I would consider that a friendly amendment.
Not so much for me. I mean, I'm happy to withdraw and let Councilman Friedson second it. And I just think the difference is, if we put it on Category 2, at least my ever-changing understanding of Category 2 is that we're going to try to fund it in this year's budget, and as opposed to what if there's money left.
Well, no, that's
as a supplemental
understanding of Category 2 is definitely not my understanding of Category 2, that it would be funded in the FY22 budget.
It would be funded in the summer if new funds become available as part of a list of items that we will have indicated our interest in potentially pursuing based on the availability of those funds, but
it would be supplemental.
Haven't been identified at this point and may never be available.
Right, and that my understanding is that would be supplemental funding for the current budget. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the whole thing. The budget.
I could build a bridge here. Like, there's no way we're going to just approve all the Category 2 items, like across the budget. We're going to have to work our way through them and see how much funding we have. So it's kind of a half measure of saying, if we think we want to use Category 2 money, at least it's an option.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just make it easy. I'm fine to take the friendly amendment. I'll just say that I don't think on the list of Category 2, I stated my earlier position that I think we should come back to it in 23, but I'm fine to take the amendment so we can move on. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you for agreeing with that. I just wanted to note a couple of things before we move on from this. The issue that was raised in this pack, that was raised by Mr. Smith, it happens throughout the entire budget. And we talked about that in our budget briefing. I have raised this issue consistently, and I have no issue with us saying that this is not an appropriate thing to do because it violates our fiscal policies. But we're violating our fiscal policies throughout this budget, in the use of pay-go funds, in the fact that we're not hitting our reserve target, in the way that we're using FEMA reimbursements for the first time ever, expected money that we may get reimbursed for one-time savings, and using that over $100 million to balance the budget with ongoing expenses, the use of ARPA funding, and the way that we've made assumptions based on that. There's hundreds of millions of dollars that we have used to balance this budget off of one-time federal savings, and the way that we have changed the way that we address the adjusted governmental revenues calculation, the AGR. So I think it's important, based on consistency, that we just note that. And I've raised it before. I want to raise it here because we are making what I think is a fiscally prudent decision to make sure that we are following our fiscal policies and that we are not funding one-time revenue sources for ongoing expenses. But we have put ourselves in a position in many other decisions in this budget where we have done that repeatedly, not to the tune of $1 million of what we're talking about here, but to the tune of over 100, maybe several $100 million in this budget. So I just think it's important that we be sober about that and be serious about that. Ultimately, before we approve the budget, we're going to have to make tough choices on all of those things, including the AGR calculation, including the use of federal funds, including what we end up doing with ARPA funding to balance the budget, including the FEMA reimbursements and PAYGO and the ultimate reserve target. And so this is a very tangible, specific, understandable, and clear demonstration of the county executive's approach to this entire budget that this council is going to have to decide whether or not we're comfortable with that and moving forward. I just hope that we don't make a one-off decision based on these issues, that we apply our fiscal policies across the board in our budget and make decisions and understand the ramifications of those decisions. And I thought it needed to be mentioned in this context. I appreciate that. Thank you for the friendly amendment. Look forward to coming back to it. Appreciate all the concerns that have been raised. They're all important. They're all serious. And they also have much broader ramifications throughout the entirety of the budget that we are considering today and over the course of the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass, are you on the motion?
I am, and just like Councilmember Friedson on the broader topic as well, because I'm supportive of the motion, and just also want to frame the context that as I'm looking at the budget to action FY21, also noting that the packet says that the Board of Trustees, Board of Directors has asked for $900,000 to be designated in the operational reserves. And as someone who knows the nonprofit community, I understand that. And it's important to have reserves, and the reserves are there in tight times. And the reserves are extremely important if an organization is to wind down, which is not what I expect at all in this situation. But the conundrum is that as we're trying to find more funds for MCEDC to do its work, there's $900,000, which is automatically carved out. I think as a quasi-governmental organization, we just need to be mindful of that if we are designated money to go to help our economic development, we now know that nearly just shy of $1 million is being carved out for the organizational purposes. And again, I understand why that is. That is nonprofit best practices. But as we are government dealing with the budget, it's again $900,000, which is taken out of our needs. So I just want to publicly state that, and I don't know if Mr. Wu or anyone else has any thoughts about it, but it's just again conundrum that I see in the context of this broader conversation. Otherwise, I yield back to you, Mr. President.
Okay. The motion's before us. Mr. Wu, you don't want to jump in. Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Okay.
Okay. Now, incubator NDA, I think the motion would be to put that on category 2 as well. However, having said that, we're taking up a lot of economic development programs this summer, the incentive programs that we have and various things like that. So I guess I just want to say to my colleagues, it is possible that we could identify funding for the incubator programs that might be different than ARPA funding. So I think the motion here should be to defer on the recommendation, not approve the additional funding for the incubator programs this time and add it to category 2. But I also just think there's a possibility that we could find a different funding for it, within economic development or something like that, because this is urgent. We've had a somewhat floundering incubator program for a few years, and we're trying to reinvent it, and it's not going quickly enough. To me, I don't think the executive branch is moving fast enough. So we need to resolve these issues. So again, the motion would be to category 2 for the incubator. I think that is kind of a general statement that we're not giving up on it, and we will return to it this summer.
Okay.
Second, but I didn't hear the audio.
Second from Councilmember Rice. Mr. Smith, is that all fine?
That's all fine. I'll just note that the Fed committee did review it. So apart from the $310,000 that was recommended for new enhancements from the executive, the base budget of this does support a wide variety of items, including some contracts for the Latino Economic Development Center, Nonprofit Village, and so the committee also did recommend adding $75,000 to category 3 for the Nonprofit Village due to rent loss. They made a corresponding add to category 1 as well, in case that was available or eligible for ARPA. And so I guess to piggyback on the motion, just to explain the full context of the committee's review that's before the council. Thank you very much.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Okay. I think that's our business. Oh, Mr. Fletcher, is your hand raised?
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
It's okay.
You were texting me. I'm not used to the hand looking up there. Sorry.
Oh, my apologies. It was raised. I hope I can maybe change some minds with the vote that just happened, but I doubt it. But I'll say what I wanted to say.
Beg your pardon. So please go ahead.
Okay. Yes, sir. So on behalf of the county executive, we wanted to first request that the incubator funding hopefully be approved and then set aside so that the Fed committee chair and his colleagues could actually get a briefing by the consultant from the incubator study that was done, that was released early in this calendar year. The executive did follow the recommendations of the consultant in order to create a team that was devoted to the incubator solely and not sort of mix them in with other assignments and other particular staff, and that was something that he took very seriously. And it also ties right in alignment with the other funding that you just voted on for category 2 for EDC. On behalf of the county executive, it just feels like we are sending a message that we're not putting our resources where we can for economic development recovery after the pandemic. EDC, of course, our major partner in economic development, put a lot of thought capital into those programs that they feel and we all believe will be necessary for us to rebound quicker rather than later. And as the incubators go, we're talking about programs that can hopefully be used to not only generate jobs, but generate spaces for us to generate our own talent pipeline. So those two programs are very important, and they're two of the biggest programs that the county executive did put in his fiscal 22 year budget. So I hope you'll take that into consideration. Hopefully you will agree that we need to make sure the economic development is thoroughly supported in this budget. Thank you, Council President.
I think the council's spoken, Mr. Fletcher, but I know we're all very committed to the same thing and eager to get back to this as quickly as possible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, seeing no objections from my colleagues. I think we've finished our agenda for today, everyone. Thank you all so much for your hard work, and we'll see everybody tomorrow for the council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Found on Interstate 270 from Clarksburg Road, Maryland 120.